My name is Jennifer Wilson, 32-year-old WebSphere Solutions founder, currently worth $8 million. I started my business from nothing and put in 80 hours a week to support my family, who have always had financial difficulties. We've given your shares to your sister, my father Richard remarked, looking me in the eye during dinner last Sunday. She is more in need of them than you are. In agreement, my mother nodded and my father grinned and said, "You can always make money she can't." I only asked, "Is that so?" That evening, I took all of my money out. That was only the start. Tell me where you're watching from and subscribe if you want to see more stories about standing up for yourself before I continue this incredible story. Our family never had much when we were growing up in Millfield, Ohio. Richard and Margaret Wilson, my parents, lived paycheck to paycheck. To make money meet, Mom took on a number of part-time jobs while Dad worked at the nearby plant. Our modest two-bedroom home required constant repairs. Dad was unable to pay to fix Charlotte, my sister, was 3 years my junior, and had received a childhood asthma diagnosis. Even while her health problems weren't life-threatening, they were sufficient to make her the weakest member of our family. Charlotte's medical requirements frequently came before everything else, even my academic obligations or fundamental wants. By the time I was 10, I understood the unwritten positions in the family. Charlotte needs special attention and protection, but I grew up to be the mature, independent child who shouldn't cause any more issues. Charlotte required new clothes that wouldn't trigger her allergies, so I never grumbled when my parents missed my school performances because she had a doctor's appointment or when I got hand-me-downs. Early on, I showed entrepreneurial tendencies. I ran the neighborhood's most prosperous lemonade business at 11, carefully recording my earnings in a notebook. By the age of 14, I was repairing neighbors' computers for $15 each, while the nearby store cost $60. After I expressed interest in his home office setup, Mr. Peterson down the street gave me a basic education. During those early years, he became the closest thing I had to a mentor. One afternoon after I had upgraded his wife's laptop, he said to me, "You have a mind for business, Jenny. Never listen to someone who tells you otherwise." I had a variety of jobs throughout high school, including tutoring younger math students and shelving books at the library. I also worked weekend shifts at the grocery store. The majority of my wages were immediately deposited into the household fund. I discreetly gave Charlotte my savings when she needed a new winter coat or when Dad's truck required repairs. Although it was never specifically requested, the expectation persisted like the never-ending dust in our attic. Despite obtaining a partial scholarship to Cornell State, I decided to attend State University when my college admission letters arrived, since it was more cheap and closer to home, enabling me to keep working and providing for my family. Business administration was my major, and I was captivated by entrepreneurship classes that described how to start anything from nothing. I first met Ryan Davis in my sophomore year of entrepreneurship class. He was an excellent software developer, but acknowledged that he had little business acumen. For a semester project, we were paired to create a theoretical company plan. Using our complementary strengths, we created a proposal for a digital marketing platform that received the best grade in the class. We could really construct this. As we celebrated over coffee, Ryan said, "It's not only hypothetical. This solution is required by the market." My parents continued to doubt my desire to pursue a career in business. "You need a decent, steady work with benefits." Every time I brought up startups or entrepreneurship, Dad would respond, "Not everyone can be a big success story," Mom would add. "Sometimes, honey, it's better to be realistic." Charlotte, meanwhile, left community college after just one semester, saying she wasn't into school. She worked in retail for a few months at a time. My parents would always say that she hadn't discovered her passion yet, or that the boss had it out for her from the start if she quit or got fired. I was offered a position with a Chicago marketing agency when I graduated. The pay was sufficient to keep me afloat while starting my own business and providing for my family, but the entrepreneurial spirit Ryan had helped kindle would not go out. Our business discussions had progressed from theoretical to practical, with Ryan using his free time to create prototype software. Ryan contacted the night before I was supposed to accept the corporate position, saying, "I'm going all in on our idea," and I abruptly quit my job. Do you agree with me? It was the hardest choice I've ever had to make. Potential versus safety, predictability versus danger, accepting my assigned family duty rather than choosing my own route is something I need to consider, I said, Ryan, my thoughts already whirling with potential outcomes and anxieties. I didn't get much sleep that night. I had my response by morning, so I called the marketing firm and turned down their offer before phoning Ryan. Let's get started. The beginning was painful. Living off of coffee and ramen noodles, Ryan and I worked from my small apartment with a single desk that we alternated using. Over the course of 18-hour workdays, we created our platform, perfecting the business plan and making presentation decks for possible investors. The loan officer hardly looked at our company plan before slamming it back across the desk after rejecting our first bank loan application. You don't have enough collateral or experience, he said without raising his head. Come back when you've been in business for at least 2 years. For the first time since beginning this adventure, I started crying as I walked back to my apartment that day. In addition to the rejection, my mother had texted me during the meeting to ask if I could transfer $300 for Charlotte's auto insurance. Despite having no safety net for myself, it appeared that the universe was eager to remind me of my assigned job as the responsible one who provides for others. Ryan discovered me gazing at the rejection letter while seated on a park bench. He sat next to me in silence for a few minutes rather than saying meaningless platitudes. They are not necessary for us. At last, he stated, we'll find another way. And in spite of everything, I managed to believe him. With equipment improvised from credit cards and savings, we started WebSphere Solutions out of my apartment. Our workstation included a whiteboard that we had hung on the wall without my landlord's consent, 2 folding chairs from Walmart, and a wooden desk that I had discovered on the curb on my day of moving out of college. The initial 3 months were filled with rejection. I called hundreds of prospective customers cold, hunting our message with each rejection. Ryan put an endless effort to improve the platform's functionality based on input from the few individuals who were open to hearing our opinions. We lived off of cheap coffee and inexpensive groceries, making the most of every dollar. The discovery was surprising. Following my 7th follow-up call, Timothy Westfield, marketing director at Regional Healthcare Network, consented to a meeting. When we eventually sat across from him in a downtown coffee shop, the only place we could afford for a meeting, he acknowledged, "Your perseverance impressed me." We gave a demonstration of our prototype, describing how our platform could provide analytics and streamline Regional's digital marketing. Their existing setup was deficient. Although Timothy posed challenging questions, I could see the curiosity in his eyes. "You're rough around the edges," he finally replied. "However, you have something here. Let's begin with a trial period of 3 months." Ryan and I celebrated that evening at my place by ordering a real delivery pizza rather than the frozen one. This minor triumph felt significant, like the first fissure in a wall that had been preventing us from moving forward. I had to make the tough choice to talk to my parents about investing after using Timothy's contract as proof of concept. They had roughly $25,000 saved for retirement, just enough to cover the cost of renting a modest office space and buying necessary supplies. I wouldn't question my belief in this. I showed them our company strategy and Timothy's signed contract at their kitchen table and assured them that I would make the effort worthwhile. "You will receive interest on your investment when we turn a profit, and I will be able to continue supporting the family." My father looked doubtful as he combed through his thinning hair. "What if Jennifer doesn't succeed with this? All we have is this." With a conviction I wasn't totally sure I had, I declared, "It won't fail, and I won't let it." They decided to invest after a week of deliberation and innumerable inquiries, so I had my lawyer prepare the necessary paperwork granting them a 15% joint ownership as minority shareholders. I was just appreciative of their trust at the time, not realizing how that choice would later come back to haunt me. The following 18 months flew by, with 80 work weeks and me suffering from chronic insomnia. I frequently went days without taking more than quick naps in between client meetings, sales calls, and administrative duties. My social life has vanished. I was reminded by Ryan on my 31st birthday. It was a unique occasion. When we eventually moved into our first little office, a humble place above a deli in a less costly section of town, I felt a new sense of legitimacy that I had entirely forgotten in the fog of work. WebSphere Solutions felt more genuine than ever before when I had a real business address rather than my residence. Another significant event that was both frightening and a source of pride was hearing our first employee. In order to manage the increasing administrative workload as we added additional clients, Amanda Thompson joined as our client services coordinator. The experience of writing her first paycheck was sobering. Our accomplishment now determined the livelihood of someone else. We quickly secured 3 significant accounts in quick succession: a local university, a regional bank, and a network of fitness centers, thanks to referrals from the regional healthcare contract. As we expanded to accommodate their demands, every new client brought with it both new problems and income. My sister Charlotte, who had not had a stable employment for years, married Peter Sullivan, an aspiring musician, at this time of progress. Even though WebSphere required every dollar for growth, my parents still wanted me to cover a large amount of the wedding. My mother insisted on your sister's marriage after I proposed a more low-key celebration. I ended up writing a check for $15,000, which might have been used to hire another developer, but it's not like you don't have the money now. When Ryan questioned the cost, I pretended that I had family responsibilities instead of acknowledging that I was unable to refuse my family. I took my folks out to dinner to celebrate when we reached the yearly sales milestone of $500,000. Despite years of evidence to the contrary, my father declared that night, "We always believed in you. Their investment had been vital, and I wanted to honor that. We're really proud of how you're taking care of the family," my mother continued. "That's the most important thing." Something about them made me feel cold, even if their words should have made me feel better. Did they only see that as my accomplishment, my capacity to look after the family? I didn't think twice about getting my folks a new car when theirs broke down beyond repair a few months later. Simple but dependable and secure, removing the anxiety about their old car, which had been a continual source of stress, seemed like a practical approach to enhance their everyday life. The company kept expanding, albeit with some obstacles. We missed 3 days of production due to a server crash, and we almost lost our university account. I ended up in the emergency room after falling during a client presentation due to severe migraines brought on by stress. You cannot continue in this manner. When Ryan visited my hospital room, he told me the business needs you to be well. He didn't say anything, but I could tell by his expression that he was worried about my responsibilities to my family. He had seen how I dropped everything when Charlotte or my parents needed something, and how there were frequent phone calls and urgent requests for money. After witnessing our presentation at a regional business conference, Thomas Reed from Venture Capital Partners showed interest in our company. Although his offer of first-round finance had challenging terms, it would give us the money we sorely needed to grow. During discussions, he informed us, "Your valuation is approaching $2 million. That's impressive for a company your age. $2 million. The figure seemed unreal. A part of me wanted to commemorate the fact that we had created something worthwhile out of nothing. However, I also realized that higher value implied higher demands from my family. My role changed from handling everything alone to managing people and procedures as our team grew to 10 members. Despite the challenging learning curve, I found that I had a knack for leading. Our office grew to occupy the whole second level above the deli, and we made the necessary investments in equipment and furnishings. Success increased expectations from family members. When Charlotte's husband Peter made the decision to open a recording studio, he anticipated that I would contribute initial funds. My parents started discussing retirement, raising the possibility that they will require more assistance than Social Security. And despite everything, I was unable to break the habit I had formed as a child. As WebSphere Solutions grew, we relocated to a real office building in the heart of the city. With glass-walled meeting rooms and a real greeting area, the space was 3 times bigger than our previous one. When I first went through it, I experienced a mixture of pride and imposter syndrome. Was this the actual business that Ryan and I founded at my kitchen table? Our team grew to include 25 workers, with each desk standing in for a person who may have a family to support and rent to pay. The burden of that duty kept me up a lot of nights, but it also motivated me to put in more effort to keep the business expanding and successful. I found a cozy 3-bedroom house in a safe neighborhood with good schools close by because I felt it was time to move my parents out of their dilapidated neighborhood. This wasn't because Charlotte still lived at home, but rather because she and Peter regularly dropped off their kids with my parents when they needed creative time or had gigs. The business was valued at almost $5 million. When I showed them the house, Jennifer, my mother, exclaimed, "This is too much." Her eyes betrayed her words. She desired the house but felt compelled to show token resistance. I said, "You deserve it, and I can now afford it." In order to check the quality, my father silently moved across the room, stroking the sturdy surfaces and opening cabinets. At last, he faced me. "Your sister might also benefit from a different location." I know the remark hurt, but I had been used to such situations. The sudden shift in focus from my accomplishments to Charlotte's requirements. All I could do, Dad, was one thing at a time. In retaliation, Charlotte quit her minimum pay job at a nearby craft business at this time after becoming pregnant with her second kid. When I inquired about her work status over a family meal, she said, "The chemicals might harm the baby. Besides, Peter is this close to getting a record deal, we just need to focus on his career right now," she said. As I calculated how much more money the family would need from me, my parents nodded as if this made perfect sense. I had already been paying for Charlotte's health insurance through WebSphere, which listed her as a dependent, which was a dubious practice. My accountant had forewarned that the situation would get more awkward. When Charlotte needed money for doctor's appointments or baby necessities, she would call me personally rather than going via our parents. With a practiced reverence, she would declare, "You're my successful big sister," adding, "I'm so lucky to have you looking out for me." At home, my parents would proudly tell friends and neighbors, "Our Jennifer runs her own company," about me. Jennifer could certainly help Charlotte with a down payment for a house if she wanted to. "It's not like she doesn't have the money," my mother once told her sister over the phone, but in private conversations, they only discussed what more I could do for the family, especially for Charlotte. The obligation I had internalized clashed with the resentment I felt. Wasn't this the reason I had put forth so much effort to care for my family? However, it was now impossible to overlook how one-sided our relationship was. My accomplishments were not regarded as accomplishments in and of themselves, but rather mostly for the benefit they provided to others. I met architect Michael Anderson at a client gathering. His firm had just signed a WebSphere contract. He was witty, clever, and refreshingly honest. I surprised myself by agreeing to supper when he asked. Dating has been non-existent for years due to the demands of running the company and taking care of family responsibilities. Michael said, "Tell me about yourself," on our first date. And I'm not referring about WebSphere, I'm curious about Jennifer. The question took me by surprise. Apart from my business and my job as a provider for my family, who was I? I found it difficult to respond after recognizing how much of who I was had been absorbed by obligations to other people. Michael became aware of my family's frequent intrusions as our relationship progressed. Due to Charlotte's need for something, the weekend events were canceled at dinner. Every time my parents' number showed up on my phone, my expression altered. He saw intently how much they depend on you after I had to shorten our weekend vacation because my folks' air conditioner broke. I automatically responded. Michael carefully considered what he would say next. Nobody has ever raised the possibility that my family dynamic might be problematic, but there is a difference between helping family and taking advantage of Jennifer. I had previously forbidden myself to peer through the door that his remark had opened, but I promptly shut it again. You don't realize how much they gave up for me as a child, but Michael's insight stuck with me and made me more conscious of trends I had previously taken for granted. Given WebSphere's ongoing growth, I made the decision to formally establish the company's share structure. My parents already owned 15% of the company from their original investment, which had increased in value considerably. I spoke with our company lawyer about perhaps giving Charlotte some shares as well, believing that this would give her passive income and lessen the need for direct financial assistance. Charlotte's requests, however, became increasingly detailed and costly. Their home needed upgrades because it was damaging the children's health, and her kids needed private school because the public options weren't good enough. Peter's studio required new equipment due to a change in industry standards. Every request included subliminal flashbacks of childhood sacrifices, emotional leverage, and indications that my prosperity owed me to others, implying that I didn't truly love my family if I refused. My mother's statement to whoever was on the line, "Jennifer just doesn't understand how hard things are for Charlotte," when I was at their house was the tipping point. "She's always been selfish with her money," she remarked. "With all of her accomplishments, you would think she would accomplish more." With a gift basket full of pricey food in my arms, I stood motionless in the hallway. My mother had said that groceries were too costly for your father's pension, so I brought them. Something changed inside of me at that very instant. The belief that I was in charge of other people's well-being and that my worth was determined by what I contributed seemed like a chain around my neck all of a sudden. Everyone expected me to make up the losses when Peter's recording studio broke less than a year later. My $60,000 debt suddenly fell on me because family supports family. I felt nothing but resentment when I wrote the check. When we celebrated our 5th anniversary, WebSphere was valued at $8 million. With champagne and a cake shaped like our company logo, Ryan planned a small party at the workplace. "We did it," he remarked, lifting his glass. "I'm proud of us from your kitchen table to this." I was given a regional business award honoring female entrepreneurs that same week. My whole family was invited to the wedding, which took place on a Thursday night. None of them appeared. Charlotte was suffering from a migraine. My parents had to watch the grandchildren while Peter was at a gig. While the empty chairs made fun of me, I sat by myself at the family table, taking congratulations from others. Michael took their place, showing they're late due to a work emergency but still arrived in time to witness my medal acceptance. As I went back to the table with the award in hand, he murmured, "You deserve to be celebrated." Employees had even begun to notice the overt bias toward Charlotte. "You need to set some boundaries." When my parents came to the office, they hardly acknowledged the business I had developed and instead spent most of the time discussing Charlotte's kids and offering justifications for her numerous shortcomings. After seeing an especially awkward family dinner where my parents complimented Charlotte's new painting hobby, which I had paid for, and hardly inquired about the business, Michael made the suggestion the concept of boundaries seemed alien and unsettling. What would occur if I ceased to be the supplier? Would our relationship still exist in any form? After giving it some thought, I made the decision to have a special family dinner to talk about WebSphere's future. As the business grew, our lawyer recommended creating trust funds or more complex shareholding structures. I reasoned that this may be a chance to set clear expectations and possibly create some healthier habits. I spoke with our lawyer in advance regarding stock options and possible tax ramifications for family members since I wanted everything to be legal and well-documented going future. My nervousness increased as the dinner drew near. My parents' recent actions seemed to indicate an entitlement that went beyond what was expected of them in the family. Despite having done nothing to start or expand the company, Charlotte had made a number of remarks regarding her portion of it. However, nothing had prepared me for what actually transpired at that dinner. I chose to have the dinner at my parents' house, which I had bought for them in the hopes that the familiar setting would facilitate more comfortable conversation. I also bought a pricey bottle of champagne to commemorate Webfer's ongoing success and the family's role in it. The evening began amicably enough when Charlotte and Peter, as usual, came late with their kids, who hurried straight to the playroom my parents had prepared for them. My favorite dinner as a child was made by my mother. Green beans, mashed potatoes, and roast chicken despite the anxiety I had been experiencing. A gesture that moved me, I discussed our most recent business accomplishments during the main course, including a significant new client in the healthcare industry that intends to grow to the West Coast and a possible collaboration with a complementary tech company. My mother remarked that all sounds wonderful, honey, but her eyes kept straying toward my father, suggesting that there was some unspoken connection between them. Ryan and I had been working on these developments for months, and I was very pleased to give the news. A store-bought cheesecake for dessert, my father cleared his throat as he often did before making an announcement, even though my mother knew I would have gladly brought tea from the artisan bakery close to my office. His tone was very serious as he said, "Jennifer, your mother and I have been talking. About the shares in your company?" he asked. I nodded, assuming that this would start the exact discussion I had in mind. "Yes, I wanted to talk about that tonight. In fact, I've been talking to our lawyer about a choice we made." He interrupted, "something he didn't often do, and giving your sister your shares since she needs them more than you do." At first, the words didn't make sense. They lingered in the air like a vague idea that I was unable to fully understand. "What do you mean that you gave me 15% of your shares?" My mother patted my hand. "It's best, sweetie. Charlotte has the kids to consider, and you are aware of Peter's ongoing professional development. However, those shares belong to you, as I am still attempting to comprehend a portion of your retirement plan." My father's expression hardened, "and we are free to do with them what we like. Charlotte will get them." With a smug smile teasing the corners of her mouth, Charlotte straightened her posture in her chair. No sign of appreciation or humility, just a sense of entitlement. "Share transfers cannot be made without the necessary paperwork," I clarified. My emotional self was still in shock, but my business mind was taking over. "There are tax ramifications and legal procedures. Your attorney has already taken care of it," but my father interrupted once more. "The betrayal cut worse when we phoned him last week. That seemed inconceivable unless they hadn't really spoken to him at all. They were either lying or worse, had fallen for some sort of scam. My own company's attorney had helped with this without telling me." "Which lawyer specifically did?" I ask, maintaining my composure in spite of my heart being pounded. My father muttered incoherently about the firm. "Our venture capitalist was Thomas Reed, sometimes known as Thompson, Thomas, or whatever his name is. Thompson wasn't somebody. They were lying, but the purpose of the lie was equally as agonizing as if they had successfully transferred the shares," I muttered. With a dismissive wave, my father remarked, "You can always make more money." I guess he mistook my composure for approval. "Jennifer, you excel at that, Charlotte. She needs stability for the future." The connotation was obvious. My value was on my capacity to make money for other people, nothing more than a resource to be used, not my years of support, my sacrifices, or my hard work. "A leg-equipped ATM at last," Charlotte said. Her voice was smooth and syrupy. "Jenny, you have our sincere gratitude. This will have a significant impact on the children's college funding. Money for college, the kids were between the ages of 3 and 5. There would have been no need to consider college funding if Charlotte had been receiving actual shares valued at more than $1 million at the current valuation. The sum would have greatly outpaced any costs associated with her schooling. What I previously assumed was validated by her statement. None of them had a thorough understanding of the purpose or worth of company shares. Perhaps for the first time, I was able to see my family clearly in that moment. The insight was both freeing and agonizing. Years of receiving conditional affection based only on my usefulness and what I could offer, it all came together in one agonizing flash of insight. "Is that correct?" I answered in an uncanny calm tone. My father's countenance must have changed a little because of something in my tone. "Now, don't interpret this incorrectly. We're still a family. You girls are just working things out." As if my years of financial assistance, the house they sat in, the car in their garage, the trips I paid for, and the medical expenses I covered didn't matter in their fairness calculation. My words, "I understand completely," came as I stood up. "If you'll excuse me, I need to get going. Early meeting tomorrow." Every week, my mother objected, saying, "But you haven't had coffee yet, and I thought we could look at those photos from Charlotte's painting class." I gathered my purse and the unopened bottle of champagne and muttered, "Another time. Thank you for dinner." The journey home went so quickly, and I was in my driveway before the first tear dropped. Then, as though a dam had broken, I started crying in my car, something I hadn't done since I was a young child. I was out of breath from the intense heaving cries. Years of suppressed pains suddenly surfaced, not only from the betrayal tonight, but also from a lifetime of being appreciated solely for my contributions. I called Michael at midnight. When he replied, my voice was still hoarse from crying. "Can you talk?" I asked. What took place he asked right away, clearly concerned, and I told him everything over the phone. When I finished Jennifer, he listened to what my father had to say without interjecting and merely offered encouragement. "I'm very sorry," he said at last. "However, this has been their pattern for as long as I've known them, and I acknowledge that I wasn't able to see it clearly until recently." He asked the straightforward question, "What do you want to do?" My family never had agency, choice, or respect for my choices. I said, "I don't want to just be hurt. A fresh resolution is emerging and I want to act." I spent hours examining every financial relationship between my family and me after we hung up. Their house's mortgage was in my name and I was the registered owner of the vehicle. Since dependent Charlotte's children's private school tuition was paid directly from my account on a quarterly basis, their health insurance supplemental policy was through my company benefits. Would not take any retaliatory action. I didn't want to be that person, but I had to break free from the parasitic relationship that had developed. I started by going to the business account, where I kept my personal investments outside from the operating monies. I took out all of the money I had given above and beyond the necessary working capital that I had intended to utilize for our West Coast expansion. Although the company might continue without immediate growth, I suddenly required these resources for personal protection. I then sent Ryan an email. Even though it was late, he replied in a matter of minutes. I described the circumstances and my suggested course of action after that. His reaction was prompt and encouraging. "We'll work together to find what you need. Without documentation, they are unable to really touch your shares." He was correct. You would have needed to sign. Naturally, my parents could lawfully transfer 15% of my stake if they could figure out the right procedure, but they were unable to do so with my majority stake. Nevertheless, their intentions were evident, and I had to safeguard both the business and myself. I felt strangely at ease as dawn broke. Although the sorrow persisted, I also gained a newfound clarity that allowed me to see my connection with my family for what it really was for the first time. It was a one-way flow of resources and emotional effort, not the mutual support system I had feigned. The question now was what to do with this insight. At 7:30 the following morning, my father called, his voice tight. "Jennifer, the house account isn't working properly." Of course, he would notice the financial repercussions first, not my sudden departure from dinner, nor my visible sadness, but the disruption of funds when the automatic mortgage payment failed to go through yesterday. "My financial arrangements have changed in a few ways," I quietly explained. "This month's mortgage is still covered, but you will be responsible for making the payments moving forward. You know that we can't afford the mortgage on this property, which is why you bought it for us." "I didn't buy it for you, Dad. What are you talking about?" His voice raised in intensity. "I've been paying the bills and the house is in my name." A distinction exists. His lack of response indicated that he had never considered this distinction. "What's bothering you? Was last night the cause? We believed you would be pleased that we were considering Charlotte's future." I had to go, Dad, because the disconnect was so severe that I nearly laughed. "Please wait a moment as I have a meeting." I did something I had never done before. I hung up. My mother's number appeared on my phone when it rang again right away, so I put it on voicemail. Her message was accusatory and sad. "Jennifer, after everything we've done for you, how could you do this to us? Your father is inconsolable. Call us right away. They've done everything for me." The irony hurt. I sent a quick reply via SMS. "I'm taking a moment to reevaluate our financial plans. After I've had time to do so, I'll get in contact." Charlotte texted me several times in an hour, each one more agitated than the last. "Mom, you're cutting us off. I thought you were different, but what about the kids' tuition? Are you really doing this because your parents want to support me too? I assumed you were concerned about your family." Peter states, "You're being manipulative and controlling with your money." I turned off my phone and concentrated on getting ready for the day. Sarah Peterson, our actual company attorney, was suitably shocked when I told her what had happened. "They can't transfer shares they don't have proper documentation for," she confirmed, "but the fact that they attempted this is concerning. We should review all company ownership documents right away and secure everything." The phone rang in my office before I could answer. The receptionist's voice was uneasy. "Your sister and parents are present, and they are quite demanding to see you immediately." I urged her to send them to the conference room after taking a big breath. "Sarah, I asked my lawyer if he would be interested in attending this meeting." "I'm here for that," she said, grabbing her notes. There was tension in the conference room. Anger was flushing my father's face. Charlotte appeared to be about to blow up, and my mother's eyes were red from sobbing. "What does this mean?" As soon as I walked in, my father requested, Terminating the mortgage, Charlotte claims that her child's tuition payment was denied this morning as well. I believe that some boundaries need to be made clear, I said, sitting across from them. Our company's lawyer, Sarah, is available to answer any inquiries regarding WebSphere in particular. A lawyer is not necessary, my mother spoke up. This is a family-run company. That's precisely the issue. I gave an equal response. The detrimental blending of family and business needs to be addressed. Just say it straight, Charlotte slapped her hand on the table. You're punishing us because your parents want to help me too. No one is punishing anyone, I responded, keeping my cool. I'm just keeping my personal donations and business assets separate. You cannot demand stock in a business in which you have made no contributions. My dad's face grew serious. Yes, your 15% is legally yours, as I acknowledged, and you are free to transfer it to Charlotte if you so choose, albeit there are legal avenues for doing so. However, that is quite different from what you said last night. We invested in you from the start, so that 15% is ours to deal with as we like. What are you discussing? I stared straight at my father when my mother remarked in a tone of genuine bewilderment, You said you were giving my shares to Charlotte, not your shares mine, as if you had that right, he responded uneasily. I didn't mean that, that's just what you intended, I retorted, and that helped me realize something crucial. You view me as a resource rather than a human being. My mother objected, saying that my worth to this family is determined solely by the money I give them. I took out a folder and put it on the table. This is a list of all the money I have given this family over the last 5 years. Mortgage on a home, $420,000 in auto payments, $37,000 for health insurance premiums. The tuition for Charlotte's children is $65,000. $92,000 Peter's studio failed, 60,000 family getaways when requested, 43,000 recurring cash offerings totaled about 130,000. When presented so clearly, the sum was astounding. Almost $800,000 over 5 years, not including innumerable minor costs I hadn't recorded, and what I got in return, I went on, not appreciation, not respect, not even recognition. Charlotte was the first to recover, saying, So this is about money for you, proving how generous you've been holding it over our heads. Instead, I was accused of not doing enough, of being selfish with my money, and of attempting to claim ownership of something I established over years of 80-hour work weeks. No, I muttered, it's about acknowledging a painful reality. Our connection is transactional and only goes one way. It is not founded on respect and care for one another. As I explained, my father's face became more and more red, and he suddenly stood up. We won't sit here and listen to our own daughter lecture us about whether you should keep helping this family or whether there is an unresolved threat that they might quit loving me. I answered calmly, I think you should leave now, since that love already seemed conditional at best. I'll be available to talk about a healthy relationship that isn't dependent on money when you're ready. Sarah gave me a newfound respect when they left. That couldn't have been simple. I didn't confess it, but it was required. Ryan convened an emergency board meeting later that day to discuss the possible shareholder concern. Despite the turmoil my family had caused, he had been my pillar of support during this time. Your parents can't touch the company directly, he told the small board. Jennifer's majority share is safe, and we've already put in place other safeguards. Over the following few days, my relatives made more and more attempts to manipulate my emotions. In heartbreaking voicemails, my mother warned that they might lose the house. Charlotte posted pictures of her kids along with comments such, Why doesn't Aunt Jennifer love them anymore? My father's communications became more antagonistic, then abruptly changed to an apology, and then returned to being demanding. I stayed away and concentrated on working with Sarah to make a clear division between my family ties and personal holdings. When Peter arrived at the office and insisted on speaking with me, the situation took an unexpected turn. His combative demeanor scared our receptionist, who summoned security. You cannot hide behind your expensive attorneys, he yelled as he was led out of the building by security. We are aware of our and their rights. Long after he was gone, the words continued to play in my mind. They believed that they had a right, not a privilege or a gift, to access my accomplishment. That night, Ryan, Sarah, and I got together to create a thorough plan. We must safeguard the business and you. Your parents' shares are legally theirs, but we can establish a new business entity structure that lessens the impact of that 15%, Sarah clarified. I don't wish to exact revenge. I underline that it's not vengeful to defend yourself. I simply need protection from attempts to steal what I've created. Ryan gave me his word. It is essential. We came up with a three-pronged plan. First, we would establish a holding company to hold the intellectual property and important assets. Second, we would contact our most valued clients to guarantee service continuity notwithstanding shareholder disputes. And third, we would record all correspondence with my family in case legal action was required. One of the first people I called was Timothy Westfield, our first significant client who had grown to be a mentor to me over the years. After I gave him the rundown on the issue, he didn't hesitate. Jennifer, we follow you everywhere. You are the object of our partnership, not the organizational structure. I was moved by his loyalty, which was beyond any loyalty my own family had ever displayed. The majority of our other important clientele felt the same way. They valued the company I had established, trusted me, and would follow through if needed. The effects of my family's actions became apparent to us within a few days. Without my direction, they had tried to use their minority interest to exert control over business choices. The board was able to readily block these attempts, but daily operations were suffering as a result of the disturbance. The value of Webspur's stock had decreased by the end of the week, marking the first decline in our consistent growth. Workers were distracted from their work by the unusual atmosphere and were chatting among themselves about the family turmoil. I convened an all-hands meeting to deal with the matter head-on. I informed the team that although there are some structural and personnel changes taking place, our core business is still strong. Our purpose hasn't changed, and our client relationships are safe. The openness seemed to allay worries, at least within the organization, but things with my family kept getting worse. Charlotte tried to assume a leadership position at Websphere a month after the disastrous supper, ostensibly thinking that the 15% ownership granted her such authority. She unexpectedly arrived at work and introduced herself to the staff as the new creative director and co-owner. Ryan gave me a call right away. Charlotte is here to instruct the design team to alter the colors of our brand, claims that purple is a symbol of prosperity and plenty. In a different situation, it could have been humorous. Charlotte, whose professional background included short stints in retail and food service, was trying to mentor seasoned designers and developers. However, the workplace disruption was severe, so I drove directly to the office and discovered her in the conference room with other perplexed designers. I think the website needs more motivational sayings. She mentioned that people connect with wisdom, Charlotte, and that we should have a private conversation. I shouted this from the doorway. I'm in the middle of a creative direction meeting. No, you're not, you don't work here, she said, her expression displaying an odd mixture of defiance and uncertainty. I spoke in a stern but level voice. Please come to my office now. The following conversation was challenging but essential. I explained that ownership shares did not grant operational authority, particularly minority shares that were improperly transferred, but I also described the legal ramifications of interfering with a business without permission. Lastly, I said unequivocally that her uninvited presence would never be accepted again. Tears were gathering, and she said, "You just can't stand that I might have something of my own. You have always had to be the one who succeeds." The irony hurt. Charlotte, I've spent years assisting you in achieving your goals. I covered the costs of your wedding and home improvements, Peter's studio, the education of your children. Until you attempted to take credit for something you didn't build, I had never been angry with you. Mom maintained that the shares would allow me to be a part of the business. Did they describe the true nature of shares and the associated responsibilities? The legal ramifications. My question was addressed by her expressionless face. Ryan proposed quickening our protection strategy after Charlotte left, since my parents had dangling ownership in my firm without fully comprehending it and were using it as another means of obtaining cash for Charlotte without considering me or the company I had founded. This is becoming unmanageable. He was correct. We must immediately secure the business. We created a new corporate structure in a matter of days that successfully safeguarded the business's main resources and operations. Although my parents' ownership stake in the original company was still there, it had been purposefully reduced in the new arrangement. The responses from the family were expected. My father called to discuss corporate deceit. My mom begged that they were only attempting to assist Charlotte. Charlotte herself wavered between heartbreaking attempts at reconciliation and furious charges, depending on which strategy she believed would be more effective. For the first time in my life, I resisted the overwhelming tide of emotional blackmail. Every phone call, text message, and request reaffirmed the wisdom of my choice to set limits. Thanksgiving fell during this turbulent time. Usually, I would have invited them to their house, which I had bought, or hosted the family supper at my house. Instead, I agreed to Michael's invitation to stay with his family this year. The difference was enlightening. Michael's parents were really interested in learning more about my business than just figuring out how much I could offer. Without bias or rivalry, his siblings shared their triumphs and setbacks. Instead of viewing my offer to assist in clearing the table after supper as expected service, Michael's mother thanked me deeply. As we drove home, I asked Michael whether this is how family is always for him. As opposed to resources, supportive people are interested in one another as individuals. After giving me a brief glance, he immediately turned back to the road. That is the ideal of a family, Jennifer. Mutual assistance rather than one-way extraction. In the meantime, Websphere was flourishing under the new framework. I could devote all of my attention to leadership and creativity since I was no longer burdened by family obligations. We increased the range of services we offered and acquired 3 significant new customers. As workplace conflict fades, employee morale rises. Phoenix Digital Solutions, the recently formed company, immediately became a prominent player in the sector. After I took over, many clients easily moved their contracts instead of sticking with the WebSphere moniker. Charlotte made a desperate attempt to persuade me to return to the original arrangement, the client said. She acknowledged the company is suffering without you when she paid me an unannounced visit at my condo. Dad claims that the value is decreasing daily, so I said, you all wanted control without understanding what that meant. Now you have it. The message my father sent was more restrained than his other exchanges. We may have made a mistake, he acknowledged, but he was unable to offer a direct apology. Our paid business gurus claim that the company needs your leadership. The absurdity nearly made me chuckle. They had paid consultants to tell them what Ryan and I had already communicated, using funds I had supplied. I told him that Phoenix is my current emphasis and that successful businesses don't run themselves. Expertise is something that must be acquired, not claimed. The separation was crucial to my own recovery as well. I started therapy to deal with the deeply embedded patterns of self-sacrifice and caregiving that had characterized my life. My therapist assisted me in identifying the early conditioning that had caused me to associate love with provision and worth with utility. One session, she explained, you were parentified at a very young age, placed in charge of family matters and adult problems before you were emotionally capable of comprehending the weight. I was able to understand my family dynamics with the help of this framework, which did not excuse the mistreatment. I could recognize the trend, but choose not to follow it. Michael continued to provide consistent support during this change. Instead of trying to control my path, he respected it. Unlike past relationships when my family commitments had eventually driven partners away, instead of expressing bitterness, Phoenix showed support when I denied his weekend plans to go to therapy or focus on his development. Phoenix Digital Solutions exceeded WebSphere's previous valuations 6 months following the split, achieving $12 million in our most recent investment round. The industry acknowledged our creative strategy and capable leadership by publishing profiles of our quick ascent in a number of trade journals. Meanwhile, WebSphere's decline persisted. Without my direction, the business lost important clients and skilled workers, and my parents in Charlotte made progressively desperate attempts at leadership. Every month, the value of the 15% stake they had worked so hard to control decreased as the company's worth fell. When I finally learned that WebSphere was looking for a buyer to buy what was left before bankruptcy was inevitable, I was saddened by this result and wondered what may have been if entitlement and greed hadn't destroyed something valuable. The workers who stayed at WebSphere were not entitled to suffer as a result of my family's behavior. Through middlemen, I assisted with a little purchase that kept those positions while removing my family from ownership of the firm. They were paid a small amount for their shares, which was much less than the original worth, but it was something to show when the business was sold. As for me, I had found something much more worthwhile than monetary achievement: the autonomy to determine my own value independent of what I may offer others. 1 year following the pivotal family meal, Phoenix Digital Solutions' valuation rose to $12 million, $50% more than WebSphere's peak. With 40 people, our team had expanded, all of whom were enthusiastic about the company culture we had established around creativity, respect, and work-life balance. Weber was sold for a small portion of its previous value to a bigger tech company. Although the staff had made a smooth transfer, my family had only received a little return for their shares, which was sufficient to support them temporarily, but not the bonanza they had hoped for when they attempted to take over. I made the decision that I needed to meet with my parents in a different format. I recommended getting coffee in a downtown cafe that wasn't their house or my workplace. They easily consented, which surprised me. Maybe they were looking for a reconciliation that would put them back in a comfortable financial situation. Charlotte was noticeably absent because she wrote a terse mail declining my offer. Unless you're prepared to assist the family once more, there is nothing to discuss. When my parents showed up, they appeared older than I had remembered. My mother's anxious energy seemed more noticeable, and my father's assured demeanor had faded. After awkward introductions, we sat down at a corner table and drank coffee. You look well, my mother said. The new company must be doing good. Phoenix is thriving, I responded. We recently expanded to include clients in Europe. When more significant problems threatened to separate us, my father answered, "That's great," obviously uncomfortable with small talk. I waited to give him room to continue after everything that transpired. Jennifer. This was his chance to own up to the hurt caused and accept responsibility for the treachery that had split our family. We may have been too hasty, he finally muttered, avoiding eye contact and concentrating on his coffee cup. The sharing issue became unmanageable. Is there any way we might return to the previous state? Things can't go back to how they were before, I stated gently but firmly, and it wasn't an apology or an acknowledgement of the underlying issue, simply a desire to go back to the arrangement where I gave and they received. Since none of us found that relationship to be healthy, you're simply leaving your family. There was a familiar sting of guilt manipulation in my mother's comments. After everything we did for you as a child, I took a moment to collect myself before answering. I'm not leaving anyone behind. I'm setting boundaries that ought to have been in place for a very long time. Encouraging family is not the same as condoning negative behaviors. We merely wanted to assist. According to my father, Charlotte requires more help than you do. That might be accurate, I admitted, but it wasn't helping Charlotte to take from me without asking, especially something I had worked so hard to build over the years. She was learning that entitlement is acceptable, which was damaging our relationship. I described how their behavior had made me feel appreciated solely for what I could offer and not for who I was, and we spoke for almost 2 hours, covering material we had never discussed before. They provided explanations rather than understanding, but at least we were having the discussion. As our meeting came to an end, I informed them that, in spite of everything, I had made arrangements for you to get a share of the WebSphere sale revenues. It was placed into your account because I chose to share it rather than because I owe you money. The distinction was significant since it was a gift that was voluntarily given rather than a requirement that was fulfilled. Given what had happened, their astonishment indicated that they hadn't anticipated even this much. Michael and I grew closer over this trying year because he saw how difficult it was for me to set limits without becoming angry and to defend myself without punishing other people. I accepted his proposal without the doubt that would have previously troubled me 6 months after the WebSphere sale. He said, "Your family is invited to the wedding," as we were talking about the arrangements. "But only if their presence will support your happiness, not diminish it." I was moved to tears by the thought that went into his remarks. For the first time in my life, someone put my health first without asking anything in return. Several strategies were used in my healing process. My deeply ingrained views that my worth is correlated with provision were identified and addressed with the support of weekly treatment. When family relationships brought up old habits of anxiety, yoga and meditation helped me handle it. The most significant thing I did was probably create a network of encouraging friends and coworkers who showed what wholesome relationships truly looked like. I discovered a surprising purpose in coaching other female company owners, especially those who are battling with familial expectations while they establish their enterprises. Their tales frequently mirrored parts of mine, and by sharing my experience, I was able to help them set more sensible boundaries right away. I would advise them that you can love your family without putting your health at risk. In actuality, long-term partnerships with solid boundaries are frequently healthier. I invited my whole family to supper 6 weeks before to my wedding parents. Their children, Charlotte, Peter, it was an opportunity to explore whether our new boundaries could sustain a changed partnership. Charlotte, who was more reserved than I remembered, surprised me by showing up without Peter. When I asked her about his disappearance, she gave me a quick explanation. He's no longer in the picture. Despite having matured much in the months since our previous meeting, the kids looked glad to see me. Dinner went with an odd new dynamic. My parents used their words carefully, refraining from making overt pleas for help. Charlotte said she had been looking for a job for years, so when the check arrived, nobody thought I would pay for it. Charlotte remarked, "A minor but important change. I'm receiving my teaching certificate," as dessert was being served. A program offered by the community college accommodates the children's schedules. "That's fantastic," I said, sincerely happy with this advancement. "You would be a good teacher." Something briefly appeared on her face. Maybe I need to be proud or determined to stand on my own 2 feet. That was rather evident from recent occurrences. Although she didn't fully accept her role in what had happened or offer an apology, it was a step in the right path. I decided not to focus on previous ailments and instead to acknowledge the positive move. The event concluded amicably and without any fresh scars, making it a modest success by our family's standards. As they were about to depart, my father made the embarrassing comment that I was getting married. He remarked, "We'd like to come if that's still okay." I said I'd like that when we received the invitation. After some thought, I replied, hopeful, when Michael inquired how I felt about the evening in the car, for something healthier than what we had previously, not for a flawless connection or total comprehension. They are attempting to construction. Phoenix gave me leadership and business strategy lessons, but restoring my self-esteem demonstrated that the more worthwhile education was I discovered that love shouldn't be accompanied with bills, that assisting people is admirable but toxic when required, and that family is about mutual support rather than one-way exploitation. The most significant thing I learned was that my worth is not contingent on what I can offer other people. For those of us bred to be caregivers at our own expense, this is a revolutionary fact that is so evident to some. Phoenix is still growing today. My family interactions are characterized by cautious limits that safeguard all parties, and my marriage to Michael provides me delight every day. Although the trip wasn't easy, the end result made every difficult step worthwhile. In case you've ever been giving till everything is gone, please keep in mind that setting limits isn't selfish. Rather, it's essential for genuine connections. True love upholds your totality rather than just your use. Which lesson from my narrative did you find most important? Share in the remarks section below. And if this message struck a chord with you, please like, subscribe, and forward it to someone who would benefit from hearing it. I appreciate you hearing about my adventure. I hope it gives you the strength and self-respect to face your own.